The hum of the airplane engines was a lullaby, a soft, steady thrum that had finally coaxed me into a much-needed nap. I'd been working non-stop for weeks, and this flight was my escape. A precious few hours of uninterrupted peace before landing in a new city and diving back into the fray. My head rested against the window, the faint sunlight a warm kiss on my cheek. I was somewhere between awake and dreaming. The kind of comfortable doze where you're aware of your surroundings, but blissfully detached. Suddenly, a voice sliced through the tranquility. It was the captain's, amplified by the intercom, but it wasn't the usual calm, reassuring tone. This was strained, a hint of desperation in his words. Is there a fighter pilot here? The question hung in the air, surreal and utterly jarring. My eyes snapped open, my heart giving a sudden, anxious lurch. I wasn't the only one. All around me, heads popped up, murmurs rippling through the cabin. People exchanged bewildered glances, a collective confusion clouding their faces. A fighter pilot? On a commercial flight? It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. My initial thought was that it had to be a joke, or maybe a miscommunication. But the silence that followed felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. The hum of the engines, which had moments ago been so comforting, now seemed to vibrate with a nervous energy. Then, the captain's voice came again, this time more urgent, more desperate. I repeat, is there a fighter pilot on board this aircraft? We have a critical emergency. Please identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately. My blood ran cold. This was no joke. This was real. A critical emergency. Those words echoed in my mind, sending a shiver down my spine. I looked around, my gaze sweeping over the rows of passengers. Everyone looked as stunned and uncertain as I felt. No one moved, no one spoke up. It was a sea of ordinary people, on an ordinary flight, suddenly thrust into something extraordinary and terrifying. My stomach twisted into knots. What kind of emergency needed a fighter pilot? My mind, in its frantic search for answers, started conjuring up all sorts of worst-case scenarios. Engines failing? A hijacking? The sheer absurdity of needing a fighter pilot for a commercial plane crash seemed to hint at something far more complex, far more dangerous than anything I could imagine. A flight attendant, her face pale and drawn, hurried down the aisle, her eyes scanning the faces of the passengers. There was a frantic energy about her, a stark contrast to her earlier composed demeanor. She whispered something into the ear of another flight attendant near the front, and I saw a shared look of alarm pass between them. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. The plane continued its steady flight, but the feeling in the cabin had shifted dramatically. The easygoing atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a palpable fear. People were no longer chatting or reading. They were just sitting, staring straight ahead, or nervously glancing at their neighbors, their faces etched with worry. I could hear a baby crying softly a few rows behind me, its whimper adding to the growing sense of unease. I felt a knot of dread tightening in my chest. My hands were clammy, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I tried to take deep breaths, to calm myself, but it was no use. The image of my family flashed into my mind, my mother, my sisters, my nieces and nephews. I suddenly felt a profound ache, a desperate longing to hug them, to tell them I loved them. Was this it? Was this how it ended? And then, just as despair began to settle in, a voice from a few rows ahead of me cut through the anxious silence. It was a woman's voice, clear and strong, though tinged with a hint of what sounded like reluctance. My head snapped up. Everyone else's did too. All eyes turned to the source of the voice. It was a black woman, a few seats in front of me, on the opposite side of the aisle. She was dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a comfortable-looking sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a pair of glasses that had been perched on top of her head until now. She looked ordinary, not at all what I imagined a fighter pilot to look like. My preconceived notions, fueled by movies and TV, had pictured a man in a crisp uniform, a confident, swaggering air about him. This woman was quiet, unassuming. The flight attendant, who had been standing near the cockpit door, practically sprinted to her side. "Ma'am, are you a fighter pilot?" she asked, her voice breathless with a mix of disbelief and desperate hope. The woman nodded slowly. "Yes, Captain Kiana Shadow Rivers, United States Air Force, Retired. A collective gasp went through the cabin. Retired. A fighter pilot. A black woman. It was a lot to take in. My own jaw must have dropped. The relief that washed over me was so intense, it almost made me lightheaded. There was a fighter pilot. A real one. The flight attendant didn't waste another second. "Captain, the captain needs you immediately. Please follow me." Captain Rivers, or Kiana as she was now in my mind, calmly unbuckled her seatbelt. She moved with an easy grace, a quiet confidence that was immediately apparent. There was no hesitation, no outward sign of panic. She simply gathered her things and followed the flight attendant towards the cockpit. As she passed my row, I caught a glimpse of her profile. Her expression was serious, focused, but there was also a steely determination in her eyes. It was the look of someone who knew what they were doing, even in the face of the unknown. A wave of whispered conversations erupted in the cabin. People were buzzing, a mix of awe and a renewed sense of hope. A fighter pilot. I can't believe it. And a woman, too. The fear hadn't completely vanished, but it had certainly lessened. There was someone in charge now, someone with specialized skills, someone who could potentially fix whatever dire emergency we were facing. The next hour was excruciatingly tense. We heard nothing further from the captain. The silence from the cockpit was unnerving, but also, in a strange way, reassuring. It meant they were working on it. Kiana was in there, doing whatever it was a fighter pilot did in a critical emergency on a commercial airliner. The flight attendants did their best to keep us calm, walking through the aisles, offering water, their smiles strained but present. But beneath the surface, everyone was on edge, listening for any change in the engine's rhythm, any new announcement, any sign of what was happening. I found myself gripping the armrests, my knuckles white. My gaze kept returning to the cockpit door, a silent plea for good news. I tried to imagine what was going on behind that door. Was she flying the plane? Was she giving instructions? My mind, once again, went back to movie scenes, a lone hero battling against impossible odds. But this was real. This was a real woman, a real emergency, and our lives were quite literally in her hands. The weight of that thought was immense. And then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. This time, it was clear, strong, and filled with an incredible sense of relief. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I want to thank you all for your patience during this unexpected situation. I am immensely grateful to announce that our emergency has been successfully resolved. We encountered a highly unusual and complex avionics system failure that rendered our primary flight controls inoperable. Thanks to the extraordinary skill and expertise of Captain Kiana Rivers, who was a passenger on this flight, we were able to restore partial control and navigate us to safety. We are now on a stable descent and expect to land in approximately 20 minutes. Captain Rivers is a true hero, and we owe her our lives." A thunderous applause erupted in the cabin. Cheers, shouts of joy, tears. People were hugging each other, a collective release of tension that was almost overwhelming. I felt tears streaming down my own face, tears of pure, unadulterated relief. We were safe. We were going to land. 20 minutes later, the plane touched down with a gentle bump, smoother than many other landings I'd experienced. More applause, more cheers. It was like we had all survived something epic, something we would talk about for the rest of our lives. As we taxied to the gate, the cockpit door opened, and out stepped Kiana. She was still calm, still composed, but a small, tired smile played on her lips. Behind her, the captain emerged, his face beaming with gratitude. He put a hand on her shoulder, and together they faced the passengers. The cabin erupted once more. People stood up, clapping, cheering, some even reaching out to touch her hand as she walked down the aisle. She was met with a chorus of thank yous. "You saved us. You're a hero." She accepted the praise with a humble nod, her eyes shining with emotion, but also a hint of bashfulness. When she reached my row, I leaned out, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Captain Rivers. Thank you so much." She met my gaze, and her smile widened slightly. "Just doing my job," she said, her voice soft but firm. Just doing her job. The simplicity of her words, after such an extraordinary act, was profound. It spoke volumes about her character, her training, her dedication. She wasn't seeking glory. She was just being herself, a highly skilled professional who rose to the occasion when others couldn't. As we disembarked, the atmosphere at the gate was electric. News crews were already there, alerted to the emergency. Kiana was immediately swarmed, but she handled it with grace and composure, giving a brief, humble account of what had happened. She deflected praise, emphasizing the teamwork with the other pilots and the ground crew. Walking away from the plane, the fresh air on my face, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for Kiana, but for all the unsung heroes who keep our world running, the ones with specialized skills who step up when disaster strikes. And I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride, too. Pride for this incredible black woman who, simply by being herself, had shattered stereotypes and saved countless lives. She was an inspiration, a testament to the power of skill, courage, and quiet strength. The experience had shaken me, of course, but it had also left me with a renewed appreciation for life and a deeper understanding that heroes don't always wear capes or fit into neat boxes. Sometimes they're just ordinary people, sleeping peacefully on a plane until their moment arrives. And when it does, they rise and they shine, proving that true heroism knows no bounds. I often think back to that flight, to the moment the captain's voice pierced my sleep, to the fear, and then to the immense relief that followed. It's a story I tell often, a reminder of the unexpected turns life can take, and the incredible people who appear when we need them most. And every time I tell it, I picture Kiana, the ordinary woman with extraordinary skills, the black woman who was sleeping on the plane until the captain shouted, "Is there a fighter pilot here?" And she answered, quietly but firmly, "I am." Here's an image of the scene where the captain is making the urgent announcement, and passengers are looking around in confusion and concern.